Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. A and P, this one's for you. I'm going to zoom you in just a little bit. I'll be working more off the board than I normally do. Okay, to explain what I have here, we're going to be talking about the endocrine system. Okay, remember there's two systems that control the body. The nervous system, which does it very quickly, but for short duration, and the endocrine system, which is the hormonal system, which takes longer to act, but lasts longer, so it's stronger. Okay? The nervous system works off electricity, sodium, potassium, chlorine. The endocrine system works off hormones, okay, chemical compounds. So we'll start off and we'll talk about what the function is. Just told you. What glands are endocrine only? We have endocrine glands all over our body. We have them in the heart. We have them in the lungs. We have them in the testes. We have them in the brain. We have them in the circulatory system. Got it? But there's only three and a half, that their only job is endocrine. Okay? And we'll talk about what those are. Here they are. Pituitary. Pituitary gland, also called the hypophysis, extends down from the floor of the brain. Thyroid, alongside your larynx. Okay, adrenal gland on top of your kidneys. Those are the three. We look at hormones and they fall into one of two categories. Either they're polar or they're not polar. They're not polar, we call it non-polar. Then over here in the pink cloud, you see, I gave a couple of general characteristics of polar. They're soluble in water, therefore they dissolve in the plasma of the blood. Non-polar are lipid soluble. They're hydrophobic. So that means they cannot be easily transported in the plasma, but it can move through the phospholipid bilayer real easy because that is lipid. Then I went into a little bit more detail of polar. There's two groups, catecholamines and polypeptide proteins. Non-polar, lipid soluble, you can take them orally. They need a transport protein. In other words, they got to hop on something that's in the blood, which is going to be a protein that allows them to be hydrophobic and still move in an aquatic environment. It's derived from cholesterol, so the building blocks are cholesterol. And they're secreted from the adrenal cortex. That's the cortex of the adrenal gland. The adrenal has two layers, the outside, which is called the cortex, the medulla, which is the inside. Then we go to the first gland. So what I did is I took these three, flipped them upside down, and are going like this, from the bottom up. First one's the adrenal gland. I said the adrenal gland, there's two of them, one on the right, one on the left, has it outside and inside. The inside's the medulla, secretes these hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Remember the sympathoadrenal exception to the two neurons of the autonomic nervous system. Remember there was a pre and postsynaptic neuron, or pre-ganglionic, post-ganglionic. There was one exception where there was only one neuron, and that was the one that went directly to the adrenal gland, specifically the medulla. And that was called the sympathoadrenal system. Remember, second messenger attaches to a regulatory protein on the plasma membrane and then activates kinase. Do you remember that? With adenylate cyclase. Okay. And it talks about glycogen to glucose and glucose to glycogen. Okay, using insulin. Then we go to the cortex. The corticosteroids, of which there are three. But the corticosteroids as a group deal with metabolism and electrolyte homeostasis. Electrolyte, sodium, potassium, chlorine. That's balanced in the blood and in the body. And then metabolism. There are three types, as I mentioned over here. The glucocorticoids, I'll talk about characteristics of that, of which cortisol is the major hormone. Mineralocorticoids, aldosterone, and gonadocorticoids, which are the androgens, the sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. Then we go, that's the first one. Here's the second one, the thyroid. This is second and a half. Remember I said there was 3.5? The thyroid and the parathyroid are always lumped together, but they're actually two separate entities. The thyroid gland, we've heard of that with a goiter and metabolism and so on and so forth. Parathyroid are 4 flattened sacs, 2 on the right, 2 on the left, underneath the thyroid gland. So they lay right up against the thyroid cartilage. They deal with iodine and thyroglobulin. There's thyroid cells. I'll talk about T3, T4, thyroxine, which is T3, and it activates protein synthesis. So when we were talking about protein synthesis and DNA and messenger RNA and ribosomal RNA, I said, what triggers that to start the process is a hormone produced by the thyroid gland. So when we need to make proteins, which are for enzymes or for anything, it's controlled by the thyroid gland. And we'll talk about how that happens. And then we'll talk about the thyroid follicles. How do we make that hormone, thyroxine? And then we'll talk a little bit about parathyroid, which controls calcium in the body. Then I'll erase all of this and I'll do the pituitary. Are we good? I guess you didn't see any of that part, huh? Let me go back. Here it is. Sorry about that. Okay, here's where I was talking about with the mineralocorticoids. That was the second type. The first type was the glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, gonadocorticoids, and then we went to the thyroid gland and the parathyroid. Okay, and I talked about this and thyroxine and T3 and T4, and then how we make it. And then the parathyroid is for calcium levels in the blood. Okay? Okay. Okay, with this one, I'm going to be using the pins because most of the information I have on the board. So it's going to be more of an explanation. There's very little drawing involved here because it's just hormones moving through the blood. Okay? Oh, I know one thing I wanted to tell you. You see 2 words I just wrote up here. Tropic and trophic. Tropic, that's P-I-C. Trophic are hormones that are released that cause a gland to release another hormone. So it's kind of like a domino effect. That is a tropic hormone. We're going to see that in the pituitary. Trophic with a PH hormone, the only difference is the H. The trophic hormones are hormones that act on a structure. So they're the ones that make something happen. Do you understand? Test question. Okay. Okay, down here. You didn't see that. I'll bring it up later. Endocrine system. Mainly hormonal system. Function. They cause a reaction in target cells. So when a hormone gets to a specific target cell, it's going to cause that cell to do something. It may cause that cell to grow. It may cause that cell to undergo protein synthesis. It may cause that cell to increase or reabsorb or to expel sodium or potassium or some mineral. Do you understand? Okay. Metabolism, respiratory rate, heart rate, those are all controlled, in addition by the nervous system, all controlled by hormones. Got it? So you got the function of hormones. Takes a long time to get things going, but it's very strong and allows it to go on for a long period of time. So it controls the body. Two things control the body: nervous system and endocrine system. Nervous system, fast reaction, short duration. Endocrine system, slow reaction, long duration. Okay. There's only 3, and I'll put a half, glands in your body that are only endocrine. Only endocrine. Number 1 is the master gland called the pituitary, which extends from the floor of the brain. The second one is the thyroid gland, which is alongside the larynx or voice box. And the third one is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland on top of the kidney. Now, there are 2 types. Change colors. There are 2 types. If we took all the hormones there are and put them into a bucket, you would find that they would divide into 2 parts, 2 types. Those that are polar and those that are non-polar. 2 types, only 2 types. Those that are polar and those that are non-polar. Okay, let's look at the characteristics, common characteristics of something that is polar. Polar, okay? It's water soluble. We call that hydrophilic. Okay, so therefore the big thing is a polar hormone can float around in the blood and doesn't need anything to carry it. Got it? So it dissolves in the plasma, moves along without any problem. So the gland, all the gland has to do is dump it into the blood supply and off it goes. And it goes every place in the body until it lands on a target cell or a target organ or a target tissue. Got it? And then it causes something to happen. The only problem is with something that's polar is once it gets to the phospholipid bilayer, it can't get through the phospholipid bilayer because the lipid part, the fatty acids on the inside. So it needs a gate. Remember I was talking about those gates and channels? Okay, okay. The next type is nonpolar, which is lipid soluble, which makes it hydrophobic. Okay, now, problem is, when it can't move in the plasma, it's repelled, it's stuck over there, unless it can jump on some type of carrier molecule, which is going to be a protein, and then it can move about the body until it finds a target cell or tissue. If it does, then it can be offloaded off that protein carrier and move right through the phospholipid bilayer because it's hydrophobic, just like the fatty acid is. Okay, now let's go back to polar again. There is 2 groups of polar hormones, the catecholamines and the polypeptide. The catecholamines are hormones that are produced by the medulla of the adrenal gland. Just a minute, I have one of these guys right here. Here's what we're talking about. The adrenal gland on top of the kidney. The adrenal gland. There's an outside, which is called the cortex, and there's an inside, which is the medulla. The medulla is the one I'm talking about right now. I'm going to see if I have one of these that's cut open. Nope. Okay, anyway, the medulla is where norepinephrine and epinephrine as hormones are released. If norepinephrine is released from a neuron, it's a neurotransmitter. If it's released from a gland, it's hormone. Got it? Okay. Back over here. The catecholamines are released from the medulla. An example is norepinephrine. Polypeptide proteins means it is a long amino acid sequence that is hormonal. And those are the glycoproteins. Okay? Catecholamines, norepinephrine, medulla. Polypeptide proteins, long amino acid chains that are hormonal. An example is the glycoproteins we're going to see here. Nonpolar, lipid soluble. Advantage, you can take it orally. So any hormone that you take orally is nonpolar. It needs a transport protein in the plasma. We talked about that. Now, as you can see here, this protein, the polypeptide protein, is a bunch of amino acids together, and when it gets to a certain length and a certain sequence, it's an active hormone. The catecholamines are norepinephrine. They get to a certain structure and they become an active protein. I mean, an active hormone. Nonpolar begin with a chemical compound called cholesterol. Cholesterol is where it starts, and you start adding things to the cholesterol molecule, and it gives you a different nonpolar hormone. So for an example, you take cholesterol and you add certain things to it, you get testosterone. You take cholesterol, you add other things to it, you get estrogen. You follow what I mean? Okay. So under nonpolar, they're derived from cholesterol, and they're secreted by the adrenal cortex. We're going to get to those in just a minute. Secreted by the adrenal cortex. Are you getting all this? Now, the advantage of this online lecture is you can stop it, write these things down. Don't just sit and stare at it. It ain't going to do you any good. Do the same things I'm doing with arrows and stuff. Whatever's going to make you remember. But you can keep stopping it. Digest it, back up, go back forward again. Good? Okay. Okay. We're done with this. What you see here is what is a hormone? What is a gland that secretes only hormones? What is the difference between polar and non-polar? What is an advantage of being polar? What's an advantage of being non-polar? Non-polar, the catecholamines and polypeptide proteins. Non-polar, derived from cholesterol, comes from the adrenal cortex. Now let's look at the adrenal gland on top of that kidney that I showed you. Okay, that's this one right here. This is the one we're going to start with. Good? Okay. Adrenal glands. There's two of them, one on the right, one on the left. They sit up on top of the kidneys. So they're superior on top of the kidney. They have an outside, which is called the cortex, and it's not just an outside little thin layer, it's a band. The outside called the cortex, the inside called the medulla. Medulla. Cortex. So let's talk about the medulla first. Time to change colors. The medulla, or the medullary layer of the adrenal gland, there's other medullas, okay? There's a medulla of the kidney. So the medulla of the adrenal gland secretes two hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine. You probably know them as adrenaline, okay? They come out of the medulla, period. The only place it comes from, period. You know that it is involved in the fight or flight. You know that when we talked about the nervous system, that between the first neuron and the second neuron, In other words, pre and post ganglionic neurons or pre and post synaptic neurons. It was always oh gosh, just a minute. Acetylcholine is always released there, always, regardless if it is sympathetic or parasympathetic. But on the other end, in other words, between the second neuron and the target cells or glands or whatever it may be, it could be a couple things released. Remember, it could be epinephrine, norepinephrine, which is going to be sympathetic. Remember? Okay. So this is where we're at. And it is involved in the sympathoadrenal system. In other words, there's only one neuron. What I was saying is these two hormones are released at the very end in the sympathetic system of the autonomic nervous system. That is the hormone that's released. Got it? Or the neurotransmitter. Sorry, let me back up. Hormones come from glands. Neurotransmitters come from neurons. In this case, I was using where you've seen epinephrine, norepinephrine before was when we talked about the nervous system. Now we're talking about hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, coming out of the medulla. I want to make sure you got that clear. I was talking about two things simultaneously using the same chemical compounds. Okay, if you got that, great. If not, and you still can't figure this out, read about it. If it still doesn't work, email me, I'll fix it for you. Sympathoadrenal system. That's the nervous system portion that causes the release of these guys. Okay? It's second messenger. Adenylate cyclase. Remember, the second messenger is always cyclic AMP, which activates kinase. Okay? What is caused from the release of these hormones is glycogen becomes glucose, and glucose becomes glycogen with the help of insulin. So what you're doing is you're monitoring. Think about it this way. What do you use glucose for? We did this. Think. Down diagonal circle staircase. Yes, cellular respiration. The making of ATP. What do you need to make ATP? Glucose. Where do you get the glucose? Where does the cell get glucose from? The blood. Is there a homeostate? Is there a window of glucose in the blood? And the answer is, yeah, there is. Okay, if you have too much, insulin then removes it from the blood and stores it in the liver or skeletal muscle or turns it into lipids inside adipocytes. If you don't have enough, you got to reverse that process. So the easiest thing to do is to reach into the liver and skeletal muscle and pull out glucose. It can't come out because it's glycogen, a huge long glucose monomers hooked together. So you have to have a different hormone, which is glycagon, and that will take glycogen, convert it into glucose, then it can come out through the phospholipid bilayer and into the blood. You've increased your blood levels. Well, you figure if you're running or you're in a fight or flight, you need to burn a lot of ATP. That means your adrenal system, the medulla part of it, is going to be releasing epinephrine, norepinephrine to trigger insulin and glycagon, however you're going to do it. Do you understand? Okay? Now, this is the medulla. Let's go to the cortex. I'm going to move over just a little bit. Wrong. Okay. We're pretty good. The cortex, collectively the cortex of the adrenal gland. And we're talking about the adrenal gland, not the cortex of the brain, not the cortex of the kidney. We're talking about the cortex of the adrenal gland. Collectively, those are the corticosteroids. Let's change colors. Those are collectively called the corticosteroids. Collectively, they control metabolism and electrolyte homeostasis. Homeostasis, window. Just like everything in the body, you can have too much or too little. That's outside the window. You put it back in the window and now you're homeostatic. Okay? The hormones that control those things are called the corticosteroids. The electrolyte, the common electrolytes in the body are sodium, potassium, chlorine, and maybe calcium. Those are the big guys, but there's also magnesium and the iron and all that other kind of stuff. So you have to control those, and corticosteroids do it. There's three types, this test question, 3 types of corticosteroids. 3 types of corticosteroids. Number 1, the glucocorticoids. Now just think about it. It's telling you corticosteroids, corticosteroids, glucose, the ones that control glucose, that window of glucose. Okay, so if you need it, if your glucose levels are down, let's just say you're exercising. Okay, you've heard of your second wind, haven't you? So you're running, you're on your first wind, yeah? And all of a sudden, man, you start getting lethargic. You're going, man, I can't go any further. I don't have any energy. And all of a sudden, boom, pretty soon you're going, hey, I just got a little burst of energy. Oh, I got my second wind. You didn't get second wind, nothing. What you got was the cortex released the corticosteroids, the glucocorticoids, which are a hormone that causes the release of glucose into the blood. So your level of glucose in the blood goes up. So now you can go through cellular respiration. Your mitochondria doesn't have any glucose, so it can't make cellular respiration. So it's shouting out, bring me some more glucose. Your respiratory rate is bringing oxygen, but you got to have them both. Okay? The glucocorticoids is what monitors that. Okay? And the main hormone, which is going to show up on your exam, is cortisol. That's what's released from the that's released as a glucocorticoid is the cortisol. Sometimes it's called hydrocorticoid. Another thing that it does is causes amino acids to be converted into glucose. Remember, glucose is what you're after. Okay? It also will break down proteins to make the amino acids to make the glucose. Glucocorticoids, glucose in the blood, monitoring that homeostasis. Do you understand? Okay, now you can see where I put tropic and trophic here. Tropic are it's a name given to hormones that react on another gland to produce the hormone. So in other words, tropic hormones have no effect by themselves. They only affect the trophic hormones, which then act on glands or cells or whatever it may be. Got it? Trophic hormones are the ones that do something. Tropic, just tell the trophic to do something. Got it? I'll get into it when I do the pituitary. The second type is the mineral corticoids. Minerals. Sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, iron. Those are the mineral corticoids. Electrolytes, remember when we talk about electricity, sodium, potassium, chloride? Okay, those are the electrolytes. Aldosterone is the main one released from the cortex of the adrenal gland that is considered a mineral corticoid, aldosterone. When we do the urinary system, the kidney system, I will show you exactly the way this is released. But it's kind of like a domino effect, kind of like making if you think of it, when we did a blood clot, remember factor X made prothrombin, thrombin that causes fibrinogen to become fibrin, and that's what we wanted. Renin causes angiotensinogen to become angiotensin 1. So the renin is released from the distal convoluted tubule, which is not going to mean anything to you right now, but it's released by the kidney. And that is kind of like factor X. Circulating in your blood, instead of prothrombin circulating in your blood, you have angiotensinogen, which is an inactive form. Renin plus angiotensinogen in the liver is converted to angiotensin 1. Then angiotensin 1 goes up to the lungs, just because that's the pathway of blood. There's another enzyme called ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. Yeah, you may have heard of that a little bit. Okay, that's what the COVID virus 19 attacks, ACE in the lungs. Once it is ACE converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 then goes down to the adrenal gland. So it made a big friggin' loop right back on top of the kidney and caused aldosterone to be released, or aldosterone. That is a hormone that controls the reabsorption of sodium. Got it? So you want sodium. What you're really after is water. So sodium, when it moves, because we can pump sodium. So when sodium moves over to there, it's a electrolyte. So what happens is chlorine follows it to make it stable, making sodium chloride. Okay? Now you have a solute. What's going to follow salt? Water. So you can't move water, but you can move sodium. Chlorine then goes with it, water follows it, so essentially you control water. So by controlling sodium, I don't think I put it right here. By controlling sodium, you control where water goes. So if you want more blood volume of blood, increase your blood pressure, you release aldosterone. Because aldosterone is going to cause more water to be retained in the plasma, which means your blood volume goes up, which means your blood pressure goes up. Okay? I will explain it more when we do the excretory system. Okay? And I put down you need a receptor in the cytoplasm. Once you dump off aldosterone, it doesn't do anything. It has to have a receptor take it to the nucleus because it's going to begin protein synthesis. Gonadocorticoids. Gonads. Those are sometimes called the androgens. Sexual characteristics, testosterone, estrogen. Okay, you got too much testosterone, you get a mustache. Okay, you got too much estrogen, you get mammary glands, a little bit of roundness on your hips. Okay, so you know what the secondary sexual characteristics. Again, when we get into the very last lecture, I'll talk about male and female pelvis, the hormones, and how things happen there. Okay? Anyway, gonadocorticoids. There's the three. Glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, gonadocorticoids. Got it? Comes out of the cortex. Next, thyroid and parathyroid. Now we're done with the adrenal gland. So here's where we're at. Thyroid. Okay, you didn't see that. I went out of it, but it's still on there. Just back it up. Thyroid, parathyroid. Let's do the thyroid first. What does the thyroid gland do? Essentially, metabolism. Somebody that has an overactive thyroid gland, in other words, it's secreting that hormone really, really good, thyroxine. What does it cause? Well, that person can eat French fries, potato chips, sugar, soda, and never get fat. Okay? Then you have the underactive ones. The underactive ones, you look at a French fry and you put on weight. Okay? But you can't get out of your own shadow because you're so lethargic, because you don't have the energy. So it's energy producing. What is involved in producing thyroxine? Iodine and thyroglobulin. Thyroglobulin is the protein. Iodine is the mineral. You put them together and you get T3 and T4, which I'm going to tell you right here. The thyroid gland is made up of thyroid cells, and those cells have follicles in them. Follicle, remember, is a house, and that house traps thyroglobulin. And you take thyroglobulin, or you take the globulin, which is the protein part, the thyroid part, which is the iodine, put them together, and if you have 4 of them, iodine attached to the thyroglobulin, you get what's called tetraidoglobulin. Tetraidoglobulin, T4. If you have 3 of them attached to a globulin molecule, it's called triiodothyronine. I say globulin, I meant thyronine. T4, let me do that again, is tetraiodothyronine. T3 is triiodothyronine. The thyronine is thyroglobulin attached. Got it? In order for it to do what it needs to do, it has to get to the target cell. And when we talk about metabolism, it can be any place in the body because there's receptor cells everywhere depending on what we need. It's got to get to the plasma membrane. It's got to get through into the cytoplasm and into the nucleus so it can activate your DNA to begin protein synthesis. So it has to have a carrier molecule in the nucleus. So once it gets into the cytoplasm, we look around and go, what am I supposed to do? Well, what you're supposed to do is activate protein synthesis. Okay? So we're talking about T3, T4. Activates protein synthesis. Do you see it right here? Activates protein synthesis. You've heard of a goiter. Proper name, hyperthyroidism. No, that's not true. A goiter. A goiter comes from hypothyroidism. That means usually you don't have enough iodine in your diet. So because you're putting demands on protein synthesis for metabolism, you don't do it. The thyroid gland figures, well, I have to grow. It's a trophic hormone. It's a trophic hormone. I have to grow in order to produce more. So your neck begins to swell. You get a goiter. In this country, we don't see it very often. Hyperthyroidism means you produce too much. Now, here's how it happens. Thyroid follicles, I just talked about that. The thyroid gland has follicles in it. And those are places to capture protein, thyroglobulin, that binds to iodine, either in 3 or 4. If it's 4, it's tetraiodothyronine. If it's 3, it's triiodothyronine. I have it up here. There's tri. I'm looking for tetra. Here. Tetraiodothyronine. Okay, that's T4. Okay. The active form is T3. So what the thyroid gland is doing is it's putting 4 on there and 3 on there. It's circulating in the blood. When it gets to the target cell, the only one that can make anything is T3. That's the only one that can activate protein synthesis. And it's thyroxine. Someplace I have it up here. Well, it doesn't look like I have that up there. The hormone is thyroxine. Just a minute. Just a minute. You're going to see it magically appear. T3 is thyroxine. T4 can be converted into T3 and has to be before it can become active, which is in thyroxine. Thyroxine is what initiates protein synthesis. So we talked about protein synthesis with messenger RNA and transfer RNA and ribosomal RNA. And we said it comes out of the nucleus and it attaches to a ribosome. And once it gets onto a ribosome, it starts cranking out, bringing in amino acids and making this according to your DNA. Remember that? Okay. What actually starts that way back in the beginning is thyroxine from the thyroid gland. Because you're putting a demand on your body to do something metabolism-wise, thyroxine is what does it. You understand? In order to make thyroxine, you need thyroglobulin, which is a protein, and you have to collect that. And then you add iodine you get from your diet. You put the two together, you get tetraiodo and triiodothyronine. Okay? Okay. Can you see me here? See my arm? Yeah, you can barely see it. Okay, right here, I have parathyroid. And I said there's 4 of them. They're 4 flattened sac about the size of my thumbnail. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 on each side. It controls calcium levels in the blood. Okay, we already talked about why do you need calcium? Well, you need it to make hydroxyapatite for bones. But ultimately, what you need it for is for muscle contraction. Okay, calcium. So that means you got to get calcium. Well, I eat calcium. I'll take calcium tablets. It'll go right through you and into the toilet. You have to be able to pull it out of your digestive tract after it's broken down. It's going down in the small intestine. You have to be able to pull it out, ship it over to the liver by the hepatic portal system. The liver then dumps it into blood on the other side. Now you have calcium in the blood. Okay? If you don't use it, your kidneys will say, oh, we're outside of homeostasis, so we're going to dump it out on the other side. So you urinate out calcium. So you have a hormone called calcitrol. I didn't put that in there either. The parathyroid glands control calcium blood levels. Do you understand? They either reabsorb it from urine. So when it's going through the kidney and you're making urine, it'll take it back out, put it in the blood. Or you absorb it from food out of the small intestine. Are we good? We good? Before I go any further, I want to make sure this was uploaded under your module. Okay, this is the list I'm going off of. These are the terms that are put up on the board. Okay, so you make sure you have this done. Now I'm going to pause it for a minute, erase some of this board, and we're going to come back to the pituitary gland, the last of the 3. Okay, the last part of the endocrine system. Let me color it up for you a little bit. The third one we're going to talk about is the pituitary gland, also called the hypophysis. And you can spell hypophysis with an I or an E. Pituitary gland, also called the hypophysis. That's a test question. The pituitary gland is divided into 2 parts. Posterior and the anterior. Posterior, you can't see this. Let me back up. How come it jumps around like that? Okay, here's where I was at. Do this again. The last endocrine only gland we're going to talk about is the pituitary. Sometimes it's called the master gland. The master hormone gland. It's also called the hypophysis. Pituitary gland, hypophysis. There are two parts to it, posterior and anterior. Posterior, test question, is also called the neurohypophysis, which means the hormones are being produced in a neuron. The second one is called the adenohypophysis. Adeno means it's being transported in the blood. Okay, it's produced in nuclei, but it's the tropic to trophic. Remember that one? I'll explain that one. I put it right here, trophic hormones. The hormones, the two hormones of the pituitary gland are ADH and oxytocin. This is straight memorization. ADH stands for antidiuretic hormone, antidiuretic hormone, or vasopressin, same thing. Vasopressin, ADH, same thing. Under its influence, under ADH, when it's released, remember, when the hormone is released, it's transported in the blood. It's either transported in the plasma of the blood if it's water soluble, or it's transported on a protein if it's lipid soluble. Remember, there's only two. And it goes every place in the body. If ADH lands in your eye, nothing happens. If ADH lands on your toenail, nothing happens. It has to have a target cell. Do you understand? Okay? Now, the target cells for ADH are blood vessels, the smooth muscle around blood vessels, vasoconstriction. Without it, vasodilation. On the kidneys, antidiuretic. What does diuretic mean? It means you get rid of a lot of water out through your urine. Okay? If you have high blood pressure, the way they used to treat high blood pressure is they gave you a diuretic. You took that, your kidneys then were fooled, and you start dumping off all kinds of water. Your blood, the amount of blood in your circulatory system dropped. When it dropped, so did your blood pressure, because you don't have as much blood. If you add water to it, which is easy to remove and add water to your blood, the more blood volume you have, the higher the blood pressure. Do you see? So somebody who was suffering from high blood pressure, you give them a diuretic. If they don't have enough blood pressure, you give them an antidiuretic. And we do one of those in the posterior pituitary called ADH, antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin. Do you understand? So what I did is I said, function of ADH, water retention in the kidneys for all that happens, or blood vessel constriction, which happens all over the body with smooth muscle. We got it? Now, the second one is oxytocin. Not oxycontin, that's for you dopers. Okay. Oxytocin does two things. It causes constriction of either lactiferous glands or the uterus. Okay, so guys, if oxytocin is circulated in our blood, does it have any effect? And the answer is no. Why? Because we don't have lactiferous glands and we don't have a uterus. Do you understand? If in the presence of oxytocin, you will have milk let down, you'll start leaking, and your uterus will start contracting. Do you understand? Okay. They're both produced by nuclei in the hypothalamus. Okay? I don't have any board space. I'll come back because I want to get up to here and then I'll draw you a picture. Remember when we did the brain and there was colored red and blue and pink and purple, and it was right down in the hypothalamus and had little chunks. I said those are nuclei, and those nuclei produce hormones, and those hormones are stored in the anterior pituitary, or there's hormones produced in the anterior pituitary that those control. And I said then by the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei produce hormones that are stored in the posterior pituitary, ADH and oxytocin. Okay, so they're made in a neuron as like a synaptic vesicle and a neurotransmitter, and then they go down and are stored in the posterior pituitary until they're needed. That's why the posterior pituitary is called neurohypophysis. And the tract, okay, the axons that lead down to it is called the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, which is what I have here. It says these hormones, ADH and oxytocin, are transported by way of the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, neurons. The nuclei, in other words, they're made in cell bodies. That's where the protein synthesis is going on. The hormones are made in two nuclei. Remember, nuclei are clusters of cell bodies, supraoptic and paraventricular. Do you understand? Okay, now that you got that, I'm going to erase this and draw you what it looks like. Okay, I've been here 7.5 hours. And I don't have my pajamas on. Hey, don't forget to wash your pajamas, okay? Okay, they're probably beginning to stink. And don't think that since you haven't gone outside, you don't have to take a bath or brush your hair. I wished I had hair to brush, okay? And brush your teeth too. Man, you ever notice that smell every time you talk? Okay, that's coming from your mouth. Okay. Okay, we just did some cleaning up here. All right, here we go. You see this? Yeah, here we go. Here's the brain. Corpus callosum. Hypothalamus. Okay. Let me draw in a couple of things. So I'll do them in red so you can see it a little better. This is too big. This is only about, it's not even anywhere near that big. This is optic chiasma. Remember a bunch of nuclei, so your right eye knows what the left eye is doing? This constriction part here is called infundibulum. This is the pituitary, also called the hypophysis. And it has an anterior and a posterior. Okay. Right here and right here, that looks like the same color. Let me do a different color. This is the supraoptic. Supraoptic. This is paraventricular nuclei. They take, using an axon, supraoptic ADH. Paraventricular oxytocin. Okay? Now, so this is all neurons. When it's going to be released into the blood, capillary beds, running right here, dumps the contents out into capillary beds. And this is to your blood supply. Output via caps. It's going to be that way for either side. Just the anterior has another step involved. Okay. Okay. ADH and oxytocin are trophic. They're going to have a direct effect on a target gland or cells. Okay? The next one, anterior adenohypothesis. Now I'm going to jump ahead all the way over to the red where it says hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. So we have nuclei. In this case, we're not going to name them. Nuclei. There's 6 of them. Nuclei. Nuclei. I ran out of colors. Anyway. So these 6 run their tropic hormones down into the anterior pituitary. I'm doing this for a reason. And it's not neuron, it's a portal system. Remember the hepatic portal system? So this is like a blood vessel. Remember, begins and ends in capillaries, and it's a tube. And that tube carries the products, these tropic products of these hormones, which I haven't told you those yet, that causes the release of the anterior pituitary trophic hormones into the blood by way of caps. So how it gets out of here is the same. Where it goes is in the same. But the anterior is under control of tropic hormones. Got it? Okay, so there's the hormones. The posterior doesn't produce any hormones its own by itself. It just stores them. The anterior one produces 6 that are controlled by the 6 that are produced in the hypothalamus. Do you understand? Okay, now let's move over here. The anterior pituitary produces trophic hormones, but they don't do anything. They don't know, they're too dumb to get out of the pituitary gland. So they have to be told to get out by another hormone. Those are called trophic hormones that are produced up in the hypothalamus. Do you understand? Okay? Trophic hormones cause target glands to grow or shrink and therefore produce and therefore do something. Okay? Now, this is straightforward. There are 6 hormones, trophic hormones, released from the anterior pituitary, also known as the adenohypophysis. And here's the 6. Growth hormone, also called somatotropin, GH. We've heard of those, huh? People were abusing those, probably still might be, but it got real popular about 15, 20 years ago. Growth hormones. They took those because they wanted to be bigger. Yes? Only problem is it caused your heart to get bigger too, which killed you. This growth hormone initiates protein synthesis, which results in tissue growth, organ growth. Do you understand? Now you can see the test questions. Growth hormone. Where is it made? Anterior pituitary. What's another name for it? Somatotropin. What's its abbreviation? GH. Okay. Now, one we just talked about. Thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyrotropin. Abbreviated TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyrotropin. It causes the thyroid to secrete T3 and T4. You know what that was. The T3 is thyroxine. Got it? What does that do? Initiates protein synthesis, metabolism. Okay? Third one, adrenocorticotropic hormones, also called corticotropin, abbreviated. Now this is a new one. They used to just go ACH. Now they go ACTH. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. So there's 4 letters in it. Causes the adrenal cortex. Remember, the adrenal gland has a cortex and a medulla to secrete the corticoids. Remember the corticoids? 3 of them. Remember that? Okay. 4th one. Follicle stimulating hormone. Now, we talked about what a follicle was. Generally speaking, we said a follicle was a house. You remember? We have a hair follicle, a house where the hair is at, the hair root. Okay? We have a ovarian follicle where the egg is at. You get it? Okay? Those are under control, not the hair. The follicle is under control of the follicle stimulating hormone, also called folliculotropic FSH. It causes the ovarian follicle to develop and sperm. Guys are finally getting in here. The 5th one, luteinizing hormone. Remember when the egg is ovulated and it's called, it was Graafian, and then it burst and it released the egg and it was empty. What was it called? Body, corpus, empty, luteum. Empty luteum. What causes that to form is LH, luteinizing hormone. One of the hormones released from the anterior pituitary. Okay? Sometimes they're called gonadotropin. The gonads. LH. It also causes, now in dudes, down in our testes, remember when we did meiosis and I said there was a void, like an empty sphere. It's a follicle. And inside of that follicle was seminiferous tubules. Remember that? And those are the tubules made up of cells that can do 2 things. It can undergo meiosis and mitosis. And those cells were called seminiferous tubules. They were called, just a minute. Seminiferous tubules, spermatogonia. Remember those cells, spermatogonia? They had the ability to undergo mitosis and meiosis. Okay? Those are under control of hormone. Okay? FSH. But testosterone is under influence of cells that surround those follicles called cells of Leydig, Ledig, Leydig. Okay, those produce testosterone. And the last one is prolactin, which is milk production. Obviously, us dudes do not have lactiferous glands, so it doesn't make any difference. We can drink a glass of prolactin. It isn't going to have any effect on us because we don't have the target cells. Females do. Got it? Now, all of these trophic hormones, the ones that are stored down in the anterior pituitary, they're made there, not stored there. They're made there, are controlled by the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus produces tropic, no H, tropic hormones that when they're released, they're transported down to the anterior pituitary, which kicks them out into the blood. And it's transported by the hypophyseal portal system. And that's what you see. I'm going to move this over. Going the wrong way, brother. Way too far. Here's where I'm at. Hypophyseal portal system goes to the anterior pituitary. Got it? Almost out of black. Now, remember the infundibulum? That's where the portal system is in. It's in this little narrowing. Got it? Called the infundibulum. That's why I have this infundibulum written right here. Okay? So if we want to draw it, this is the way we draw it. Kind of goes like this, narrows down, pituitary at the bottom. This is the infundibulum. This is the hypothalamus. Okay? Optic chiasma out here. Front of your head is over here. Pineal gland down here. Okay. Last step. Hypothalamus is the tropic hormones. They don't do anything but cause other hormones to be released for the target glands. Do you understand? So what I did here is I said, here's your hormones. Look at GH, TSH, LH, and FSH, ACTH, FSH, LH, somatostatin, and prolactin inhibiting. Okay, we'll talk about these guys a little bit odd. So I'll talk about those in a minute. So the hypothalamus makes a hormone. Okay, and it comes from a neuron. So that means it comes from a cell body. Clusters of cell body are called nuclei. And that's those colored ones I drew down there for you in the hypothalamus. And these are the ones that they're producing. Okay, plus these. So GHRH, so here's your GH, growth hormone releasing hormone. That's the one being produced in the hypothalamus that causes the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. Do you understand? Straight memorization, I'm gonna put a bunch of these on the exam. Thyroid releasing hormone causes the thyroid gland to secrete hormone. Thyroid secreting hormone, remember that? Caused by TRH. Now, ACTH, which is adrenocorticotrophic hormone, this stands for corticotrophic releasing hormone. So they didn't put the A on this one. Okay, so this is the old terminology, but they still don't have an A out there. Otherwise, it would be ACRH, but it's not. ACRH, corticotrophic releasing hormone, causes adrenocorticotrophic hormone to be released. Got it? G, capital G, lowercase n, gonado releasing hormone, gonadotrophic releasing hormone, LH and FSH. Good? Now, the last two, which I said were the kind of weirdos, is somatostatin inhibitor and prolactin inhibitor. Once the growth hormone, somatotrophin, is released, you will continue to grow. Your muscles will get longer, your bones will get longer, et cetera, until it gets to a magical point and then it's shut off. That means you have to have a hormone to inhibit the growth hormone. This will go on continuously, just like the thyroid stimulating goes on continuously, just like the adrenocorticotropic hormone goes on continuously, and the luteinizing and follicle stimulating hormone goes on indefinitely. You got to stop them. Now, these come around every month or every whenever needed. This one goes on for your growth period, okay? When you start shooting up, it's really shot up there, but it goes on till you get to your late teens and then it's shut off. What shuts it off is somatostatin inhibiting, okay? Somatostatin inhibiting hormone, SIH. You got to have that or you'll continue into gigantism, okay, or be a basketball player. Prolactin inhibitor, same thing. Once you start producing milk, ladies, you will continue to produce milk, okay? You can't shut it off unless you have an inhibiting hormone. That's PIH. Prolactin inhibiting hormone. So whenever the suckling stops, this one is released out of the anterior pituitary, which shuts it off. Do you understand? Okay. Let me think. You have all the terms that I have behind me. They're already uploaded. I have to upload the sarcomere. Okay, even though I showed you a picture of it, you can make a copy of that. Okay, I'll make a copy of this and get that uploaded for you. Later this week, at the end of this week, I'll recap what we've done this week. Okay, now your A and P, that means you have your exam, your lecture exam on Thursday at 7:30. And it goes for an hour and a half. That means it shuts off at 9. You don't start it at 7:30. It doesn't mean you get your 90 minutes. It means the clock ticks starting at 7:30. Okay? And then the following Tuesday, you have your lab exam. So what you're seeing now, if you kind of went ahead, is in case somebody wants to go in and look at the muscles and they want to look at the stuff I'm talking about right now, you can. Otherwise, it's slated for this coming Thursday and the following Tuesday. And then we're in the last segment of the course. Okay? And the way it's going to go is endocrine system, which we just talked about, but there's nothing with the lab on endocrine system. And then we're going to have the muscle, and that's huge, all kinds of lab on the muscle. But the lecture part comes at you in two ways. It comes to you as directed teaching, which you saw, and then I'm going to narrate the PowerPoint for you. Okay? So there'll be two pictures on your screen. There'll be a picture of me right up here in the corner of your screen, and then I'll have the PowerPoint going on down here explaining it step by step. Most of it's a review. The endocrine system is chapter 17. If you go on DocuShare, there's an older one which is really good with pictures that I kind of drew up here on the board for you. What I would do is use that as something extra. Go through it, read it. Everything we talked about is on there, but it's kind of, it has more professional pictures on it and that kind of stuff, okay? And then after we do that, we're going to start winding up the semester, which means you're going to have, I think, about 4 more chapters. Reproductive, you're going to have digestive, you're going to have endocrine, muscle, and you're going to have excretory and reproductive. I think that's it. Anyway, whatever's on the syllabus. Okay, so I'm going to get this uploaded for you. Okay, if you don't watch it until this weekend, you're still okay. Make sure you bust your tail on this exam. The lecture exam is not going to be easy, even though I think it's easy. Unless you really, really prepare, you're going to be caught out there with 6 units. Okay, for those of you that have been trying to drop the class, which I hope you don't, but if you have been trying to drop the class, it was supposed to start on April the 6th, which was Monday, but the school has not got it going yet. It's supposed to happen, they changed it to the week of April 6th, okay? So I'm gonna shut this off. We're done. Don't forget to wash your pajamas.